Charles John Huffam Dickens was born on February 12th in the year 1812 in England. His parents are John Dickens and Elizabeth Baruch. In the Victorian era, Dickens rose to the heights of fame and fortune, so much so that by the time of his death, he has become and still remains the second most famous Victorian after the Queen herself. His major works include Oliver Twist, A Christmas Carol, David Copperfield, Bleak Hours, A Tale of Two Cities, and Great Expectations.
Victorian era. The 63-year period from 1837 to 1901 marked the reign of England's Queen Victoria. Victorian novels tend to be idealized portraits of difficult lives in which hard work, perseverance, love, and luck win out in the end. They were usually inclined towards being of improving nature with a central moral lesson at heart. Major characteristics of Victorian novel are the industrialization, class, science and religion, progress, nostalgia, utilitarianism. Great Expectation is the 13th novel by Charles Dickens and his penultimate complete novel that depicts the education of an orphan nicknamed Pip. It is a Billington romance novel. It was first published in serial form. The novel has been adapted for stage and screen over 250 times.
Next, we can move on to plot overview of Great Expectations. Pip lives with his abusive older sister and her kind husband Joe Gargery in the Ken marshes. One day, Pip visits the elderly Miss Havisham, a bitter old woman who teaches her adopted daughter Estella to break men's heart. Pip quickly falls in love with Estella. Pip visits Miss Havisham every other day and walks her around the banquet table. She plays for him to be a blacksmith apprentice. He is unhappy with the work, however, and when a lawyer reveals that Pip has inherited a fortune from an anonymous benefactor, a young man moves to London to become a gentleman. In London, Pip lives beyond his means and falls deep in debt. He is surprised to learn that his mysterious benefactor isn't Miss Havisham, but a convict named Macwitch, whom Pip met while visiting his parents' grave as a child. This realization incites Pip to change his ways. Meanwhile, Estella marries another man. Miss Havisham dies, but not before begging Pip to forgive her for teaching Estella to be cruel. He then moves to Cairo to become a clerk. Years later, he reconnects with a kinder, widowed Estella, and the two walk hand in hand on a site of Miss Havisham's old estate.
Now let's move on to the character list of Great Expectations. Pip, the protagonist and narrator of Great Expectations. Pip begins his story as a young orphan being raised by his sister and brother-in-law in the marsh country of Kent in southeast of England. He is passionate, romantic and somewhat expects more for himself than is reasonable. The next important character is Miss Havisham. Miss Havisham is a wealthy, eccentric old woman who lives in a manor called Satyr's House near Pip's village. She is a maniac and often seems insane, flirting around her house. The next important character is Estella. Miss Havisham's beautiful young ward, Estella, is Pip's unattainable dream throughout the novel. He loves her passionately, but though she sometimes seems to consider him as a friend, but sometimes she is usually called cruel and uninterested in him. Herbert Pocket. Pip first meets Herbert Pocket in a garden of Satyr's house. Years later, they met again in London and he becomes Pip's best friend. Herbert nicknames Pip as Handel. He is Miss Havisham's cousin and hopes to become a merchant so that he can afford to marry Clara. The next character, Mrs. Joe. Pip's sister and Joe's wife. She is a stern and overbearing figure. to both Pip and Jo. She is petty and ambitious.
Finally, we move on to the analysis of the novel. Pip, the main protagonist of Great Expectation, is also its narrator. In many ways, the novel functions as a buildings roman, a book about its protagonist's moral formations. Dickens used a lot of tropes of Gothic romance in his novel, invoking the supernatural and mysterious and thwarted love. Although Dickens wrote Great Expectations in the mid-Victorian period, it is set several decades earlier. Dickens leveled critique at the educational system and the legal systems of Britain. Great Expectations work on a number of levels, as a critique of Victorian society and as an exploration of memory and writing. However, it is perhaps more importantly a search for true identity. During the course of the novel, Pip comes to realize that his great expectations, that is, his social standing and wealth, are less important than loyalty and compassion. Great Expectation was also noted for its blend of humor, mystery, and tragedy.